All right. Welcome everyone to the 26th Roundtable on Measuring Corruption. We've come a long way. We are just starting. We have just started last month, the third year of these meetings, and it promises to be a very interesting one today, as we are joined by Alexander Gerganov. He's an expert on the topic of state capture, on the study of it, of course, and he has been working on different projects related to its assessment, evaluation, and measurement. So I'm very excited to have him with us today to discuss this topic that seems to just be gaining in interest and importance as we continue moving into the 2020s, right? If it's the first time that you join this roundtable series, I just very briefly tell you about how the setup will work. I see a lot of faces that have joined in the past, so for you it will be no surprise. The session will last 90 minutes. In the call, it was announced that we were going to have a presentation for about 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A and open floor discussion, but in reality, both of them are merged, meaning that at any given moment, if you have a question or comment concerning the slide or the point that Alexander is making at the moment, please don't hesitate, just raise your hands or push the button for the icon, and I'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Otherwise, I will ask you to please keep the microphone muted, not to alter the flow of the conversation. And that's going to be pretty much it. I'll be doing a lot of the interruptions, so Alexander, I apologize in advance for that. But I promise that
I like
I'll
being
try not to.
interrupted, so go ahead.
I'll try not to derail the presentation too much, though. Okay. And one last thing, yes, if you would like to intervene by asking a question or comment, if you could also please just state your name and share your affiliation or area of interest, so that we also get to know you a little more, and Alexander as well, because one of the points for this series of roundtables is to hopefully start building a little bit of a network in relation to measuring corruption, as all of us are anti-corruption researchers and practitioners from different parts of the world. So this is, I always consider it a really good opportunity to get to engage a little bit with colleagues from different parts. Okay, Alexander, the floor is yours. If you could start, please, by introducing yourself as well, and you can start sharing your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph, for the introduction and for inviting me to this very interesting roundtable. So I like being interrupted, so go ahead, interrupt me. Let's have a discussion, not a presentation. I always like having these slides where I can jump from one topic to another if someone asks me. So I probably have the slides already for something you might be wondering, but if you interrupt me, I will just jump ahead and cover the other topics. So let's have this as a flexible discussion. And my name is Alexander Gerganov. I'm the director of the sociological program at the Center for the Study of Democracy. This is an European public policy institute that is based in Sofia, Bulgaria, but we cover all of Europe and other regions as well. And one of our main topics is anti-corruption and corruption measurement. And I'm also an assistant professor at the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology. This is the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. And as Joseph introduced me, I have some experience in measuring state capture, no experience whatsoever in capturing any states, so don't ask me about how to achieve this. There you have other players who are more experienced than me, but I have some experience in trying to measure state capture because it is a very difficult thing to do. I'd say we started this work around 2016, and our first, let's say, piloted instrument was ready in 2019. But my experience with measuring corruption goes back to 2009 when I started working in the field, mainly in measuring administrative corruption through victimization surveys. So this is more or less about me. And now starting with the actual topic about measuring state capture, I will ask you, Joseph, how do you usually start these discussions about measuring corruption? What's the first thing that usually people talk about when they talk about measuring corruption?
To be fair, normally they start by introducing the importance of measuring corruption. Although after 25 times, I think that most of us already understand the importance, but specifically how it might apply to your area of interest or the region in which you work.
And what's the next then, after the importance?
After that, I would say they also introduce their previous work on the subject. So a little bit of playing their own work there, and before moving into the core of the materials and the methodology and the results and all that.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, then I don't know if this will come as a surprise, but I will start with the definition of state capture. And I will start, of course, with Wikipedia, where everyone starts nowadays, being with Google search or directly going to Wikipedia. This is very important because for me, okay, I'm not a political scientist, I'm a sociologist slash psychologist, but for me to measure something, I need a very operational definition. I need to know what the phenomenon is that I'm measuring. So when we work with abstract concepts like high-level corruption, or in this case, state capture, that as I will mention, it might not be corruption at all. It might be a completely different phenomena. So when we try to measure something like that, the first thing I want to have is a very operational, very tangible definition of what's the phenomenon we are trying to measure. Of course, there is no guarantee that we can measure it. I'm sure that for 25 iterations of this roundtable, it has been mentioned numerous times how corruption is a hidden problem, and naturally it's more difficult to measure something that is hidden and that is not commonly shared and discussed. But with state capture, it is even more difficult because there people have different understandings of what state capture is. And you can see the Wikipedia article. It starts with the classical definition. It refers to the term that was coined by the World Bank in a World Bank report around the 2000s by Kaufman and Hellman, and it specifically goes to ex-Soviet countries. And this is the initial definition by Hellman, Jones, and Kaufman. State capture back then referred to shaping the formation of the basic rules of the game, laws, rules, decrees, and regulations through illicit and non-transparent private payments to public officials. So more or less, I could summarize this as illegal lobbying. However, since then, things started developing, and lately they're more or less exploding in the area of state capture notions. People started talking about other phenomena. They included them under the state capture hood, like illegal contribution to political parties and candidates. Some say that it is a form of grant corruption. Some say it is something completely different, like not a type of corruption, but a different phenomenon, including corruption. And I'm more or less on this side, probably. Some talk about achieving political monopoly, which is somewhat a different aspect. Some define state capture as a particular network of players or actors who cluster in a particular way or shape, and this is ongoing. It's an ongoing debate how to define state capture, what state capture is, if there is even the need of such term state capture, or we could go with clientelism, kleptocracy, oligarchy, or grand corruption, or high-level corruption, whether this term is somehow interchangeable with some of this. I think it is a separate phenomena that can be defined, and I will show you later a theoretical model that we came up with. And I think that it is a different phenomena. So this term more or less captures it, pun intended, captures the phenomenon pretty well. So I believe that there is need for the term state capture, and that there is something substantial behind it that is different from clientelism, different from kleptocracy, different from simple high-level corruption, even if it is entrenched high-level corruption. I think it is something different. And I cannot claim that we have a final definition or a great definition. I would say that we have an operational definition. And again, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not that deep into the theoretical aspects of state capture. Some of my colleagues are, but this operational definition is useful. It defines a problem that we can observe in many regions, and a problem that is probably there even in Western countries, where state capture is seldom talked about. Usually we focus on, you saw even the Wikipedia article, usually we focus on ex-Soviet countries, on the Balkans, on African countries, on Latin America. However, I tend to think of state capture, and I tend to think of any phenomenon, basically, probably it's my background, as a continuum, not as a binary thing. Okay, this state is captured, this state is not captured, this state is corrupt, this state is not corrupt. I tend to think of things as continuums. So our operational definition that I will be stepping on when describing what measuring instruments I've used is that state capture is a combination of different forms of corruption which have a single objective: to secure large-scale and long-term privileges to captors by exploiting the power of government for private benefit. And by captor, we mean actors with privileged status enjoying undue advantage in economic and or political terms. So the key here is large scale and long-term privilege. So I would say that high-level corruption for me would be an individual act or a series, but not systemic, let's say, illegal or illicit contracts involving corrupt transactions. It would be something more or less incidental, and it can happen everywhere. But when you secure both long-term privilege and large scale, you cover large parts of a country, then we can start saying that things are going into the state capture realm. And here is a more detailed definition. By the way, you can access freely the state capture assessment diagnostics book where all this is described. It was published in 2019. And here we say the state capture could be described as virtual long-term privatization of the state functions, which ensures a systemic privilege for captors. And we describe different pathways. However, we tend to define state capture as the end result, as the outcome, because as you can see, the pathways can differ. And the pathways, it is like water. It goes the way the resistance is smallest, basically. If you cannot do illegal lobbying, then you can affect the way the rules are implemented. So you don't necessarily need to shape the laws. You don't necessarily need to shape the rules if you can be exempt of the rules. In fact, you can use the rules to hit your business competitors and to be exempt of the same rules. So you cannot say I wouldn't define state capture in terms of the methods that are used, because they can differ. So there are multiple paths to reach the same goal, and in my mind, the best way, the easiest way to define state capture operationally in terms in order to reach the stage of measurement is to go for the end result, for the goal, for the outcome of state capture. So you will see this throughout all theoretical models and throughout the measurement itself, that we rather try to focus on the outcomes than on the pathways. And one other thing I should mention, that usually corruption is considered illegal. Here we rather talk about illegitimacy, because if you shape the rules of the game, if you shape the laws, then what you're doing is no longer illegal. So if by even the initial definition, okay, the act of shaping the rules of the game, the act of shaping the laws might be illegal, but when you benefit from it, once you have shaped the laws, once you have coined the laws to your advantage, it's no longer illegal. So we rather try to look at things outside of the legal-illegal division. And this is the book I mentioned, where there is more detail about the theoretical side of things and about how we struggled with defining this. And I should say that it took several years in order to reach the final operational definition. It took at least 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, because it is very difficult to both have something tangible and to cover different aspects that different scholars have in mind when they talk about state capture. If you go through the literature, you will see very different notions of state capture. And I was recently, last year, I was thinking about state capture in Vienna, organized by Ayaka, and there again, even 1 year ago, people had different notions about what state capture is, how we should define it, and this is an open debate for me, how we should define state capture. But going from the definition I just mentioned, we built a set of instruments, and we believe that these instruments are very useful regardless of how you define state capture and whether you consider the phenomenon under our theoretical model to be state capture, or you consider them to be something else. It doesn't really matter, because we are measuring something that is harmful for the society, is harmful for democracy, and ultimately how you the exact definition that you use is not that important. But I always start with the definition and with the theoretical model, so that we set some foundation for everything else that is to come.
Alexander, could I ask you
Of course,
something regarding your definition, the
yes,
one you provide 2 slides before? And I can already tell that a significant amount of work went, a significant amount of thought went into providing this definition, settling into the definition. I completely agree that this is one of the most important ways of pursuing and measurement activity, because if we don't know how to define the phenomenon, then we end up just measuring something or anything, right? It becomes very problematic later on. And there are important elements here, and I was trying to deconstruct them as you were discussing them. But I particularly like the fact that you use the term privileges, right? Which in the next slide you mentioned that it's both political and economic privileges, right? So it's not necessarily just a state capture through corruption for corrupt intents in terms of benefiting, in terms of finances or money or whatever, but it's also for a political capture, for political privileges, right? Yet at the same time, the definition does end with the idea of state capture through corruption, corruption understood as an activity for private benefit, right? So when I was thinking about the private benefit part, so I was thinking, oh, that means that this definition of state capture would be rather non-ideological, because that leaves still open the possibility of our enlightened dictator, for example, to capture the state for the benefit of the people, theoretically speaking, of course, right? But then I went back
great
to the
argument. Yeah.
beginning of your definition, where you include political privilege, right? So then could you tell us a little bit about how your definition of state capture would deal with this issue of how to label or classify non-democracies?
Definitely. This is the next very important thing I was going to mention, because we always, during these 2, 3, 4 years when we struggled with defining this phenomenon, we were trying, so you are trying to generalize a definition to cover something. And then we come up to, okay, what is North Korea? Is North Korea state capture? And our answer always was no, it is not state capture. It is a dictatorship. It is something completely different. So in the end, we went with a very bold move, and I still stand behind this. We say that the phenomenon of state capture is meaningful only for democracies. And it is not meaningful to talk about state capture for non-democracies, because there the game is different. It's like you have a goal in soccer, you have something else in hockey, like in basketball, or I don't know, in boxing. So it's a different game there, and their state capture, the term state capture and our definition of state capture doesn't make sense. So basically, it makes sense for democracies. And I see a raised hand, and I will answer this. I just want to make a small warning that the discussion about definitions can easily go for an hour and a half. So have this in mind.
Absolutely, but that's what happens when the definition is so bold, Alexander. Claudia, please.
I agree. I agree. Mea culpa.
This is a great discussion. So hi, Alexander. I'm Claudia Vaz Camargo from Basel Institute on Governance. And I want to provoke you a little bit with what you just said, that this only applies for democracies and not for dictatorships, because you just said before that you like to think in terms of continuums and not dichotomies. And we know that there are democracies that have authoritarian tints and traits, and we can talk about the whole spectrum. And I've had experience working, as a consultant, doing research analysis in places that I would definitely categorize as capture states. And in my opinion, I think that what I would add to your definition, or maybe it's there inherent somehow, but at some point, this long-term privatization for privilege, it also turns into a systematic protection of the captors. And this, I think, involves a systematic weakening of potential dissenting voices, a systematic, kind of making sure that everybody among the captors is, in line. And this, it's inherently pushing towards an authoritarian orientation. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And talking about continuums, I would say that we have continuum towards democracy, towards the ideal democracy, whatever this is, whether it is a Weberian democracy or something else. Again, I'm not a political scientist, but we have a democracy continuum, and we have a failing democracy continuum. So I would say that on the path to the perfect authoritarian state, somewhere there, state capture reaches its peak, and then there is no longer state capture, but it transforms into something else. This is what I would say, but of course it is not it is not a very clear continuum, and of course when at some point state captures becomes so prevalent that that an authoritarian regime can become deeply entrenched and cannot be changed anymore, then there is a qualitative change in government, in the way the country is structured. So then I would say that the term state capture makes no sense anymore, because then it is a different phenomenon. The rules of the game changes, and of course this is the end goal of captors, to be exempt from any persecution, to remain endlessly in power. When there is even a theoretical chance for change other than some war conflict or revolution or something like that, I would say that we are still within the large domain of democracy. But when even the rules of the game are defined differently, like lately there are these books coming from China saying that there is an alternative type of democracy that is as good as the Western democracy, and that Chinese democracy is different type of democracy, as good as the Western type of democracy. So I wouldn't go there talking about state capture, because it is a different system and it follows different rules. And what we defined as state capture here in thinking of democratic states, there would have some different definition and would have some different meaning, because what we here consider illegitimate might be completely legitimate within their system. So this is why I put a stop somewhere on the continuum and say that our definition and our understanding of state capture might not be really relevant there. And I will move forward, because my next slides might answer some of the coming questions. And of course, after building a definition or let's say reaching some agreement about an operational definition that of course can be challenged, and it's a matter of further discussion within the community. We of course started thinking of a theoretical model where we can put the different elements, the different pathways, and you can see where we talk about dimensions, you can think of these dimensions as different pathways. So the classical definition and understanding of state capture was as something coming from private actors, from the businesses. And this is what we generally focused on, the business capture dimension, because it is much easier to measure. But the other way around is as viable as this political capture, so state capture initiating from political captors, and then moving to private companies, and things are interrelated. So you know, politically exposed persons and politically exposed companies are very trendy analysis nowadays, and it doesn't really matter whether it starts from private actors who then go into politics, or it goes the other way around. So political figures start building companies, and we have this political, I would say, tycoon in Bulgaria who started talking about circles of companies and controlling circles of companies very early on after the transition from after the Soviet period. So this is how the actors are thinking about this. So they are not thinking in a segmented way, like, okay, these companies will try to buy some laws in order to get advantage. They're thinking of how to achieve the capture of different functions, and prosecution, for example, it's a very important function, because if you capture the legal system and prosecution, then you're exempt from any potential retribution, any potential persecution that can stop you. So they're thinking of how to achieve their end goal, and it doesn't really matter whether it goes from the companies to the political parties, or from the parties to the political to the companies. And we define these dimensions because there are different symptoms you can measure there. And when, for example, we talk about clientelism, I would say that it is a smaller phenomenon. It is, of course, a type of corruption that could go under political capture. And I would generally argue that when there is clientelism, state capture is not that strong, because with clientelism, at least the actors change. So you have actors linked to one party, actors linked to another party, the parties change, the actors also change. But I would say, so this is an example I usually give when we discuss clientelism. But when we have state capture, so the parties change, but the circles of companies, the actors, the oligarchic network, it is always in power, regardless of which party is in power. So the oligarchs in the state capture scenario, they are more or less playing with all political actors, and all political actors are playing in the oligarchy. So there are some changes, of course, the way organized crime groups divide markets, and a leader can change, and so on. But more or less in a state capture scenario, I would argue that that there is no change of the actors who benefit from a party coming in power. So this would be the difference with clientelism. Still, when you have very high clientelism, this is a sign that things are going towards state capture. So so in my understanding, there is really a continuum and things are fluid, they are not black and white. Let's say black market capture, these are dimensions that are yet to be let's say developed theoretically, and in terms of measurement. So far we have been focusing on the business capture dimension, but let's say the black market capture, there the pressure, it comes from the organized crime. So this might be the pathway for Latin America countries to increasing state capture. And institutional capture, it comes from weak institutions. It can start with administrative corruption. So I would put administrative corruption as a factor in institutional capture, and it can start with administrative corruption and with weak rule of law, and then when multiple institutions are weakened, then they could be ultimately captured. And again, the difference would be in the wholesale versus retail. So administrative corruption would be retail corruption. I go and corrupt unofficial, and this could be widespread, but it's bottom up. It's individual actors playing in a somewhat competitive scenario. While the state capture scenario, you can capture the institution wholesale. You can have a wholesale arrangement which could even decrease administrative corruption in some cases. I see a question. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Victoria, please.
Yes. Hello, Alexander. My name is Victoria Janet from GFA group here in Hamburg, in Germany, and we're working in many of the countries you mentioned at the moment in Moldova on a big anti-corruption program financed by the EU and the German government. And what I wanted to, well, first of all, thank you so much. I have lots of questions, but I'm not going to say them at the moment. But just on this model that you've presented, I'm wondering where we can and how we can also reflect and look at civil society capture in this, because there's such a confusion and danger around think tanks and research institutes. I guess that comes into your lobbying groups, that in many countries, including more, let's say, countries that we consider, the Western countries that we consider cleaner, let's say, I think, you know, the UK and America, with think tanks and research institutes financed by, it could be oligarchs, it could be particular groups that promote particular political policies, and they in themselves have a massive influence and play into this system of influencing for private benefit the political classes. So I just really, can you say something about where you fit that into your model? And yes, I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a rather difficult question, because yes, I perfectly know about the concept of civil society capture, and we would like to expand this model to cover it. However, it is a very, very tricky matter, and it's even probably more difficult to define and conceptualize adequately than state capture is. But my short answer for now would be that I would put it in an international state capture scenario, and I have touched on this towards the end of my presentation. But for me, the civil society capture is deeply linked with international state capture, with international strategic corruption. And this is, you might notice that this so far has not been touched at all by me, because it's even more complicated. For now, I'm setting the scene, imagining that countries exist in vacuum, that there are no geopolitical forces in play, that there are no international trade relations. I'm simplifying the scenario in order to present the tools for measurement. However, things are even more complex than that when it comes to international relations. And I would say that the civil society capture, of course, it can be part of the national scene, but I would say that the most interesting aspects of civil society capture are from international strategic corruption perspective. So yeah,
Okay.
you want to add something?
Claudia?
So you said you don't mind being interrupted. So here I go again. I think the way I see it, and I think this is in line with what you said before about, you know, democracies and total dictatorships. Maybe a feature of the state capture state is that somehow they do keep a facade of democratic processes and institutions while constantly undermining them, right? And I think that civil society, at least in the cases that I've seen, it's allowed to be there and tolerated. It might be selectively threatened or extorted when it goes too far, but it also plays a role of legitimating. So I would say there's also like an inherently domestic element of the capture civil society, not to say that also there are often examples of the so-called gongos, no, the government organized NGOs. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It is just that I'm trying to focus on measuring things quantitatively. And this is why I'm saying that this is even more difficult, because I can't imagine how to measure the civil society capture quantitatively. I can imagine, but I would say that it is even more challenging. But I agree that it is part of this model and it plays. I don't know how important it is for the because you are thinking of autocratic regimes, and of course for them, for kleptocratic and autocratic regimes to validate their regime, it is useful. It is useful for propaganda. It is useful for multiple purposes. But for the state capture goal to have large scale and long-term privileges, I would say it is not that useful until the stage of autocratic regime is reached. This is my initial thought, but of course I need to think and read and work more on this, and it is definitely planned as an extension of this model. We just haven't reached this state, as we haven't really developed the institutional capture, political capture, and black market capture dimensions. So now I will start talking about measurement. And again, I love being interrupted. And even if I don't cover everything, it is not a problem, because the theoretical part of this is probably more important than the measurement part. Because once you change the model or change the theory, then you have to change the measurement as well. And the analysis part, it's so much linked to the theoretical model that it is critical. But nevertheless, just to cover what we have in terms of measurement, in terms of data, and I rather focus on quantitative methods. So I'm not that strong with qualitative methods that are also very, very important, but I generally specialize in quantitative methods. So I more or less focus in my presentation and in my work on quantitative assessment and quantitative measurement. And here we managed to cover, unfortunately, only the business capture, and of course it is covered through proxy indicators. So as I already mentioned, you cannot assess or measure hidden phenomena like high-level corruption, like state capture directly. So you need some proxy indicators. And let's say with administrative corruption, we can argue that we are measuring it somewhat directly by doing victimization surveys, where we ask citizens whether they were asked for a bribe, for example, even if this is somewhat debatable whether people are willing to share this information. But here you cannot ask the actors how much of the state they have captured, and you generally don't know this, unfortunately. You have investigative journalists discovering bits and pieces, unraveling parts of the picture, and this is also part of the problem, because if you have investigative journalists who are able to work and to unravel some parts of the state capture picture, then this means that you have somewhat free media, because capturing the media is a big part of state capture. So once you capture the media, then you have very few journalists who are able to do investigations at all, or sometimes okay, if you repress the media, then at least it is visible from outside. But if you capture it in a smart way, then you have very few investigative journalists doing something. But the prevalence of reports in a capture media state are good, and things look to be very positive. And this again touches the issue of international state capture and of disinformation narratives, of propaganda, and how these things are communicated, because let's say you start talking about parts of the problem in a capture state, and then there is always this narrative. Okay, look at this corruption scandal in France. Look at this corruption scandal in Denmark. So even these countries have corruption. We actually are not much worse than they are. And this is very very problematic when we rely on measurement that is based on media output, because when media is free, then you might have more news about high-level corruption, and people might be more exposed to talking about this than in countries where media is captured. So of course we measure somewhat the freedom of media through external indicators, but our main focus is on other let's say symptoms that can show business capture. And I tend to be a bit careful with perceptions of the general population, because, as I said, they are driven very strongly by the media output. And when media capture is a strong element in state capture, then these perceptions could be modified as well through captured media. So basically, our instrument that we developed, it focuses on the business capture dimension and on institutional enablers. And by enablers, here we mean what we mean is different aspects that by themselves are not necessarily symptoms of state capture, but they make state capture much easier, like low rule of bad institutional anti-corruption setup, let's say. or lack of impartiality, or prevalent administrative corruption. So this could easily pave the path for state capture. And historically, we can argue that we can see in countries that are usually mentioned as examples of state capture. I will not go in any detail there, but we can usually see that there are periods with a lot of administrative corruption. Then there is some degree of state capture. Administrative corruption in this period could even diminish. And in some cases, they go from state capture to outright authoritarian government. In other cases, they remain in between state capture and authoritarian government, somewhere in between. So it's a continuum, as I mentioned. But let me show you some numbers, because I'm claiming that I like quantitative assessment, but so far I've been focusing on the theoretical parts of things, and these are some numbers from our piloting of this SCAT instrument, State Capture Assessment Diagnostics instrument, and we piloted in 5 countries: Bulgaria, Romania, Italy, Spain, Czech Republic. The choice of countries was not random. We were focusing on countries we considered to be interesting from the point of view of measuring state capture. Of course, when it comes to country numbers, I would say that all indicators that work at the country level are inherently flawed, because you cannot put a very complex situation in a country into one number. Still, what we usually like to see is ranks of countries, lists of countries, and seeing how things move, let's say, in a 5 years interval. And since these results are from 2018, it's probably a time that we do another wave of this to see how things have developed. However, my perspective on these country numbers is that we start from a bird eye perspective. We start zoomed out, looking at the very broad perspective of things. And then we zoom in, and from the very broad perspective, here are 6 more countries, the Balkan countries, where we did the same exercise in 2019, 2020. And just to reiterate, the business state capture pressure, this indicator more or less reflects what we consider to be symptoms in the business state capture dimension. So these are actual symptoms that state capture is there, while the state capture enablers, they make state capture possible. So it's possible to have to not have many symptoms of actual state capture, but to have very high degree of state capture enablers. And this is a risky situation that should be addressed before actual state capture takes place. This is the reasoning behind the 2 types of indicators. But starting from this bird perspective, and of course, you can read more about this data about the Western Balkans. They're very interesting. And yeah, before I move on, Joseph, please do interrupt me.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask for some clarification concerning these 2 tables, just to make sure that I'm reading them correctly. So these go from 0 to 100, I guess 100%, correct?
Yeah.
And the 100% would mean the combination of a perfect state or a maximum score for both pressure and enablers. Theoretically speaking, what does it mean to get 100? For example, here Albania has a 95. right? Which is very close to.
I'm sorry about this. They are different scales. We just put them on top of each other. So it's not exactly percents. So the scale for each of the two, it goes from 0 to 100. So the maximum here is 200.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
And just I don't know if this is a theoretical question, but in a hypothetical scenario, how would you describe a country that would get that hypothetical 100 score in both type of dimensions here? Is there such a country? Can we have an exemplar from history or from imagination?
We probably can. I will tell you just simply what's under the hood of this business state capture pressure, as it is the easier to understand indicator. So the main component in the business state capture pressure is what we call monopolization pressure. And here is, so this now this goes from 0 to 100%. So this is the monopolization pressure, and here we define this as the share of the turnover of economic sectors that are assessed by the pool of experts covered by the Scott survey. The sectors that are assessed as highly monopolized sectors. So basically, let me just say a few words about how this assessment is done. So we have a survey among experts, and it is a large pool of experts. So I know that there are many expert surveys, but this one, it involves both what we call external experts, or experts who are not part of the government or the public officials of the country, and we also involve acting public officials from the country that we are measuring. So let's say we have 40 experts who are not in government, and 20 experts who are acting public officials. So it's a very large pool of experts. And of course, there are large discrepancies between their answers, because acting public officials, they tend to be more tolerant to whatever is going in the country, and to be more optimistic. But we are looking at where their opinions converge. And we are asking about certain economic sectors, let's say construction, and we are asking them, would you say that this sector is highly monopolized, or not so much, that only few companies hold this sector. And we take company data from large databases like Orbis or Amadeus. We take company data about their turnovers, because it is very difficult to get reliable information about the market share. Of course, the market share of the companies would be even better, but we work with the turnover, as this is readily available. And this is basically the percentage of the total turnover of all companies in a country that is located in sectors that are assessed by the experts as high or medium, with high or medium monopolization. So this is what this number reflects, and 100% would mean that all the companies are in sectors that are monopolized. That is, that all sectors in a country are considered to be monopolized by the experts, and this is not impossible if theoretically, if we look at countries where the majority of the GDP comes from, let's say, energy or 2-3 sectors that where there are only 1 or 2 state-owned or oligarch-owned companies, then we could argue that they are 100% monopolized. And the other component under business state capture pressure, I will get back to it, but I think it was the degree of having lobbyist laws, again assessed by the experts. Yes, Joseph. Yeah.
Thank you. Just then to run this by you to make sure that we're on the same page. So for Albania, what you found is that 49% of the companies operate in sectors that were assessed to be either high or medium monopolized.
No, we found that the turnover, half of the turnover of the companies in Albania is in sectors that are assessed to be highly monopolized.
I see.
So you can have 3 companies, but they can generate half the turnover of all companies. In this, naturally, this is usually the case, because if the sector is highly monopolized, there are fewer companies. And you can have, let's say, 100,000 companies, and you can have half of the turnover being generated by 20 or 30. And if these 20 or 30 are in high monopolization sectors, then we consider this to be higher monopolization pressure. So this is the best proxy we could get to reflect market concentration. So there are other indicators of market concentration, like the HHI index, that are more difficult to get the data for them. So the market concentration, the market size is expensive data to get. So this is our way around it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, and actually you can see here what the indicators consist of. So the business state capture, it includes the general monopolization pressure, what I just explained, the ineffectiveness of anti-monopoly laws, which is an expert assessment, so it's with smaller weight. We ask basically all these experts to say whether they think that laws regulating the sector help, hinder, or are not related to the formation of monopolistic, oligopolistic, or cartel structures. So basically, whether there are effective anti-monopoly laws or the other way around. So the laws even can help the formation of monopoly. And specific monopolization pressure is something very, very interesting that I will get to. It is again based on expert assessments, but it starts to get into the sectoral side of things. So I just wanted to explain the overall idea. So our overall idea is that we start from the bird eye perspective, where we have some number for a country, but we treat this with great caution. So we say, okay, this is a number, but don't really take this that seriously. You need to go deeper, and we go deeper by giving the different components of this number. Let's say, okay, this is the overall country number, but this consists of the monopolization pressure, and this is it. It consists of so these are the 5 other countries that we have covered. And it consists, you should look at the different institutional enablers. So we start breaking this number into different components. And this is where, for me, the metrics really becomes useful, because these country metrics, they are usually just used as a number to say how one country is bad and another country is good, while our instruments, they tend to focus on how to improve things. And the idea is that, okay, there is corruption in some some degree of state capture risk in all the countries, even in the best democracies. And what we should do is to try to improve things. And to do so, we need to focus on where the vulnerabilities and risks are. And this is where the breakup indicators come, and this is the meaningful level of analysis for me, at least, to look at which areas are vulnerable in a particular country. And this starts with the institutional enablers, like private interest bias is a particularly interesting indicator because it comes very close to the definition of state capture. So we basically ask the people, the experts, whether we ask them whether the control and the imposing of sanctions are done selectively, and the choice of whom to control or sanction follows private interests. So we have this list of all or the most critical public organizations in the survey, and experts, they select which public organizations they are familiar with, and they assess only the public organizations they are familiar with. And when the majority or a large group of the experts agree that a particular public organization is doing control and imposing of sanctions, or they is doing its activity selectively following private interests, this comes very close to this institution being captured. But still, we consider this an enabler. You will see that this private interest bias is relatively low compared to the other enablers. Still, this when you go at the level of particular public organization, this helps outline vulnerability areas where ideally you can do something about it. And this is a particular example. So you hear, by the way, I'm not following the chat. I'm not reading the chat. So if there are any questions in chat, please either raise your hand or Joseph interrupt me and read
Yes,
them to me.
no worries. I'm keeping track, and there are a couple of questions, but they can be addressed at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so I will just very quickly go through some of the numbers, explaining what is the basic idea, because I want to touch some interesting things like what can be done about state capture, and then we can return to this if there are questions. So here we can do state capture assessment at the national level, but also at the sectoral level. And the idea is to go from the national level to go down to the sectoral level. And this is an example where we calculated for these 6 Balkan countries, we calculated the private interest bias of public organizations that are associated with a particular sector. Let's say for construction, it would be the construction control organizations, the permit, those that issue permits for construction and so on. For local government, of course, these are municipalities and so on. And you can see how in different countries there are different vulnerable areas related to particular sectors. Some of the sectors, they are problematic all over the region, like let's say construction. Actually, these are the types of public organizations. But on this table, these are the types of public organizations. But we have also done other analysis where we link them to particular sectors and look at the intersection between how strong the organizations are and how risky the sector is. But still, you can see some like construction-related bodies or agriculture-related bodies. They are tightly linked to the corresponding sector. And these are some comparison of municipal administrations for some of the countries. Yes, Joseph?
Yes, there was a question in the chat asked by Robin Lewis in connection to this. And the question was if your assessment or the data had been broken down at some point to the subnational level, either in terms of the symptoms of the state capture or the enablers of it.
Yeah. So So this is more or less the idea that I already mentioned, that we start from the national level, then go to sectoral level. Then ideally we can go to big data analytics, where things start to become more and more concrete. We can outline even certain companies that have problematic behavior, let's say, in public procurement. And then, of course, the response can start. This is the light version of the model that are presented without the environmental enablers, without the media capture and the legal capture, and without the dimensions that we have not developed so well. So we here focus on the business capture and institutional enablers. And as mentioned, we try to break them down. So first we break them down to particular sectors. So you can see here, like, so these are sectors with high and medium monopolization pressure, which I already explained what this means. And you can see that there are some very interesting country differences. Some sectors, like, let's say, construction, pharma, telecommunications, they have pretty high monopolization, and this might be natural monopoly. I don't know. I cannot say. It's definitely a symptom of state capture, but things, when you look at the specific monopolization that I will get to in a moment, things become more revealing. But here you can see that there are some sectors that are more or less worthy focus for all or most of the countries, and some sectors that are not that trivial and that are very country specific. Let's say the land transport and transport via pipelines for Romania. It's not big news that construction is a sector that is vulnerable to state capture or pharma, but when you see these differences between countries, it starts to become more useful. And when you see sectors that are problematic or potentially problematic in only some of the countries, you should focus on this more, like gambling for Bulgaria and Italy. Yes.
Does the data also allow us to break it by administrative divisions, such as provinces or regions within the country?
No, provinces and regions, no. At least we haven't done it. We probably could, but yeah, it needs to get to the lower level where we work with big data. Yeah. I will skip this. And this is something I wanted to show you. So these are types of specific monopolization pressure, what I call specific monopolization pressure. And here the experts who think that the sector is monopolized, and some of these experts are the vast majority of the people answering the survey. So they include even public officials. So in some cases, for some sectors, let's look at, for example, Spain. 90%. This is something else. But for the monopolization pressure, in some cases, let's say 8% of the people participating in the survey, they think that the sector is monopolized. Then we take only those of the experts who think that the sector is monopolized. So the base here is only those who think that the sector is monopolized. And we ask them if they think that any of these scenarios are present in this sector, like a specific company or a small number of companies win too many public tenders. And you can see that in Spain, 90% of those who think that the construction sector is monopolized, they think that a specific company or a small company win too many public tenders. So this directs us towards public procurement analysis and to see whether there is public procurement capture. While, let's say, laws provide illegitimate competitive advantage, this is the classical state capture definition. And we can say there are sectors in some of the countries where there are lobbyist laws that provide illegitimate competitive advantage and focus on this type of analysis. And if you look at control and sanctions are applied selectively, which helps particular companies. Now, this is institutional capture. So you might have legitimate laws, however, they are applied selectively. And you can see that there are some differences between the countries. Let's say in the construction sector in Bulgaria, 40% of the experts who think that construction is monopolized think that control and sanctions are applied selectively, while in Spain, 20% think so. So these are the different pathways I was talking about. And when you think of control and sanctions, then you can open the data for the control, for the public institutions responsible for construction control. And you can see how they are assessed. If they are assessed to be with high private interest bias, or with low, if their integrity is high or low, and so on. And there are other possible pathways like concentration of grants. And when you do this type of analysis, comparing different sectors for different countries, this becomes very informative. So this, for example, is comparison of the monopolization pressure of all the countries for 3 problematic sectors, potentially problematic: construction, wholesale of pharma, and energy. And you can see that, for example, construction is not that problematic. So, for example, energy is with the highest assessed monopolization pressure in North Macedonia and in Spain and in Italy. But not in some of the other countries. While, for example, in Bulgaria, where we usually focus our analysis on construction, on energy, the wholesale of pharma comes pretty high, and this was not really expected. We seldom focused on this in Bulgaria, and it's similar in Kosovo. So this could lead academics, scientists, or even investigative journalists to focus on a particular sector for a particular country. And this is the specific monopolization pressure, where you can see that is in most of the countries, public procurement is the main pathway to achieving monopolization. However, if you focus on the control and sanctions, in some countries, results are quite higher than in other countries. And in some countries, you have higher levels of laws that provide illegitimate competitive advantage. And this is a way to, this is the same thing for pharma. For example, you can see here in Italy, the laws that provide illegitimate competitive advantage are the highest percentage of answers, and the same for energy. And now reaching the lowest level, this is something very interesting that we did. So this is like procurement monitoring instrument. This is a proof of concept, so it is working, but the data is not updated. So it was for a project that ended, I think, in 2021 maybe, or 22, and the data is not that current. However, you can see as a proof of concept how red flags could be applied to individual companies as well as different sectors based on procurement data. And here the funnel goes down. We zoom into a particular sector, and the choice of sectors, of course, was based on the national SCAT assessment diagnostics instrument. And we did this for 4 countries: Spain, Italy, Bulgaria, Romania. And you can actually log in here and play with this data and with the results. The idea is here is not that complex. We use stat data to see if there are outliers or different red flags in particular companies. However, what we do here, which is not usually done, is to combine the ownership of the companies, because there is a very complex structure of ownership, beneficial ownership of different companies, and when they're regarding separately, the picture is quite different than when you look at the whole group, at the end ownership. So this is one way to zoom in. And the end of the funnel, so to say, the stage where really the state capture assessment, it gets to particular individual cases of things that look really suspicious, and you can, for example, if you are an investigative journalist, you can take a particular company with many red flags, and if it is not investigated, you can investigate it. And we also tried actually to link media articles to this, to particular companies, to link media articles talking about corruption, to automatically link it to particular companies. So this is more or less the idea about the measurement, and I can see that I'm almost out of time, so I can either touch on what can be done to address state capture and to mention about international state capture, or I can address some of the questions. What do you think, Joseph?
Yes, I think that this may be a really good moment to dedicate the last few minutes to answering questions and getting some comments. Let me just get the ball rolling by saying that this is an impressive amount of work and impressive results as well. Just with this slide, I was
Thank you very
thinking,
much.
because the level of disaggregation of such a complex model, and some of the items that you're including here, for example, such as suspicious activity news, buyer concentration index, government item volatility, it starts appearing that the model that you've been working on is so ambitious that it can end up encompassing everything that we are working in relation to measurement of corruption, all the different dimensions, the different items, the different elements. And I can see here how they all could end up feeding the model that you've been working on. So I just wanted to take this moment to congratulate you for this. I'll just ask a very quick question, and maybe we can accumulate a couple of them. So after that, I'll invite Liz and Claudia to also ask their questions. I wanted to know, I'm sure that you have run the regressions or the correlation between the enablers, the components that are the causes to a state capture, and the symptoms of a state capture. If you could tell us a little bit about that. Liz first, and then Claudia.
Hi, thanks, Joseph, and thanks, Alexander. I think this is really great stuff, and would have tons of questions in a way, but I just wondered if I could ask a quite simple one, which is about how you select the experts. And just because, in particular, in captured states, it's often quite polarized, it becomes difficult to get independent experts and independent analysis. So I wonder sort of how you deal with that problem, how you select them, what kind of people they are.
Claudia?
Well, Liz jumped ahead of me because I also wanted to ask if Alexander could speak a little bit more about the sample of experts and how they identified who to bring on board, and I'm actually really curious to hear more about the methodology, like how many experts per country did you bring on board? How did you choose them? And also your survey instrument. Is that available? Do you make that available in your book, the survey instrument itself? Because I would be really, really interested to look at it. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start with the easier questions first. Joseph, yes, we have run some regressions, and of course, yeah, there is correlation between the enablers and they mentioned the symptoms. We haven't focused that much on this type of analysis because we are still collecting data. Because for running regressions, I usually love to have let's say hundreds, thousands of data points, and so far we haven't had enough. And I would really want to use multi-level modeling to test different hypotheses quantitatively, but we lack the data. We are in the process of collecting more data, so ideally at some point we will be able to publish a data set that everyone can play on the actual data and to see how different indicators interact with each other. Then to cover the question if the instrument is available, the instrument is absolutely available. All these books that are mentioned here, they can be downloaded freely, and the instrument is described in great detail there. We even have tutorial publications about how to do state capture assessment diagnostics that are made very easy and step by step, so that civil society organizations can use them. Because part of our state capture response is to increase the capacity of civil society organizations in countries that are in potential risk, so that they can use this methodology. And now to get to the most difficult question. Thank you, Liz, for this. And of course, the weakest thing, if I would argue, any instrument that is based on expert assessment is how you select the experts. And in my mind, no matter what methodology you have for selecting the experts, it will be somewhat subjective. It will be somewhat biased. It would be because experts, they're human too. They have their political preferences. Even if they don't have political affiliation, they definitely have preferences towards one party or another, towards one group of players or other. So our solution to this was to increase the sample size as much as possible. So we had this internal debate, and it's ongoing debate, whether it is better to have only 2 experts giving you assessments, but they would be the best 2 experts in the world, the most objective and unbiased experts there are, and you select these 2 and have them assess. And the other direction is to increase the sample so that individual biases negate each other. So this is the direction we went to, and so what we recommend for this instrument to have at least 50 experts. And how do we define the expert? They self-assess their knowledge. So we basically ask them to self-assess their knowledge, how familiar they are with certain public organizations, and we filter and show questions only for the public organizations they are familiar with. This is our approach, and of course this is problematic because in some countries the experts might be more biased, they might be more subjective, more, let's say, patriotically inclined. So what we try to do is not that much to compare different countries. I presented you this data because this is what usually is expected by cross-country comparison indexes. However, what we tend to focus is where the opinions of these experts converge. And I mentioned several times that these experts are not just NGO experts, not just academics, not not just investigative journalists. All of these are included, of course, and even business owners could be included. Everyone who is familiar with the public organizations and we included in the survey is potentially an expert. But they also include public officials. So when you have half of the sample being public officials and you have 80% of all the respondents saying that a particular sector is monopolized, we say, okay, then if so many agree on this is probably monopolized. Now let's see if it is a natural monopoly or if there are some underlying problems there. And we go deeper. This is more or less the idea, and this is how experts are selected. And I would say that the larger pool of experts fill in the survey, the better. So the only limit is how many experts you can convince to fill this in. And to have some balance, of course, I would say that 1/3 or half at most of the participants should be public officials and the rest should be external experts.
Alexander, thank you very much for, again, a brilliant presentation. Very exciting stuff that you're working on. I'm sure we'll all be following your work very closely. I look forward to the next steps on the road ahead. And I hope that we can have you again with us soon enough to present the updated rankings or more results that as they come along. Thank you again, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. I hope to see you all again for the next roundtable. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, and very nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.